Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us for the first live stream on the Adopt and Embrace YouTube channel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Paul Woods. I'm the founder of Adopt and Embrace, and we're trying a little experiment today in terms of doing some live streaming of some of our content and things like that. So I hope you enjoy it. Please bear with us as we kind of try it out for the first time. There's probably going to be a few things pop up as we go through the live stream, but as you can expect, it's going to be hopefully a valuable conversation where you can get lots of value out of what we're talking about, and ultimately something you can put into practice and apply straight away in your work, wherever you are in the world. So what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks is on this live stream, we're going to do it pretty consistently, like every Thursday or something like that, like we're doing right now. Is going to take you through Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams. So our Teams for Managers book. And when we first wrote this book back in 2019, the second half of 2019, it was before COVID. It was before Teams was on everyone's desktop in their workplaces. And there was lots of assumptions and lots of things we wrote into the book that we hoped would come true. And I think most of it has come true in terms of how people have started to use Teams to communicate, collaborate, and coordinate better. But what I wanted to do is take an opportunity to actually just read the book out to people and share with you the stories in terms of what we were thinking about when we wrote those things in the book. What were those resources that we're talking about? What are the sidebar conversations or the stories that we can tell that kind of add more context to what was actually in the printed pages in the book itself? So that's what we're going to do on the live stream over the next few weeks. A couple of things for those of you that have joined the live stream that aren't watching on the recording. We'd love to keep it interactive as much as possible. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to throw them into the YouTube chat there. I'd love to hear where you're from. So whether you're here in Australia, where I am in Brisbane, or on the other side of the world, I'd love to see your locations and chat as well, just to get an idea of where we're reaching with the content as well. First things first, though, for those of you obviously that have bought the book, thank you so much for buying the book, whether it was on ebook, paperback, audiobook. We really appreciate it. There's over 6,000 people now that have purchased the book, which is just mind-blowing for us. We were expecting about 250 people when we wrote the book. What we are doing now basically is giving away the book for free on YouTube, though, by reading out the book out loud over a number of these live streams. So if you want the more polished version, let's talk about that. Not the live one where I'm rambling about certain things. Just want a polished version of the book. Head on over to Audible. You can get a perfectly narrated version of Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams on Audible. It goes for about 4.5 hours or so, which is why we're going to break up these live streams a little bit more. But I can guarantee you on Audible, there's no dogs barking in the background. There's no aircraft flying overhead, which is just about to happen right now. And not as much rambling from me, obviously. So if you want the professional slick version of this, head on over to Audible and listen to it there. The other thing I'd say is if you've got the paperback, feel free to pull it out as we're going through and reading it, take notes as we kind of share the stories and things like that as well. That would be great to see. So without further ado, what we'll do is one last thing. If you love the content and you want to get more of it and you want to kind of see the follow-on live streams that come on onto the channel in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel. As my kids would say, Dad, you've got to make sure you say like and subscribe. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel as well. Excellent. So I think with that, let's awesome. We've got someone from Toronto, other side of the world. Perfect. So great to see if we can get that reach through this awesome medium as well. So what I'll do, let's set a little bit of context first in terms of why we wrote the book, and then I'll dive into actually talking about the book, reading the book itself. So we think back to like 2018, 2019, Teams was kind of emerging on the market. People were starting to dabble with it. IT teams were starting to play with it and generally have get a clear understanding of how to administer Microsoft Teams, how to technically set up or deploy Microsoft Teams. So there's a lot of focus on infrastructure teams or productivity or collaboration teams within organizations to get as much of the infrastructure in place of Teams. And lots of technologists are doing a really great job of doing that. But what we saw when we were doing workshops with a lot of our customers was that whilst the technology teams had a pretty clear understanding of putting the platform in place, the big gap that was missing is when you went out into the workforce, when you went out into the management teams within an organization and how they were thinking about how they were structuring how work could occur on this new emerging platform, which is Microsoft Teams that was coming out. So we had a lot of people trying to replicate what they'd been doing for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years via email. So like, this is how we communicate, this is how we coordinate our work via email. So let's just shift stuff out of Outlook and put it into Teams. And a lot of these people that were making those first steps, whilst they were getting some benefits or some improvement in terms of how they managed their overwhelm of information and things like that, it became increasingly clear the more people that we talked to that this is a really great opportunity that shouldn't be missed in terms of thinking about how we think about our work, how we structure our work to get the best outcomes for our team and the people that we work with as well. So we kind of had that kind of as a context for writing the book. And then when we actually went and saw what was on the market and what books were in development in the market, almost all of them were targeting that technical IT administrator, that technologist that was putting the platform in place. And those books covered lots of great information around, governance and how to set up teams appropriately in terms of the technical infrastructure. But almost none of them were talking about just this new way of working or how we could transform the way that we share information across different members of teams, across teams and organizations and across organizations as well. So we wanted to take this lens very much from a manager's point of view as opposed to a technologist's point of view, which is why we call it our team's book for managers, because that's exactly who we wrote it for, is managers in your organization, whether they're executives at the top, middle managers, or those first-line managers that need to manage teams. It's really a book about trying to help them understand how you could rethink work and how you could apply teams to amplify your impact, to accelerate your time to value, and ultimately help you get your job done. And we've seen lots of that happen over the last 12 months, particularly as the pandemic has caught hold across the world. So with that kind of context of kind of why we wrote the book and why we did it, what we're going to do today, we'll probably just read the first 2 or 3 chapters of the book. As I said, the actual book itself, when we did the audiobook recording, is about 4.5 hours of audio. I don't want you to sit through that on a live stream today. So we'll break it up over the next few weeks and just do a few chapters at a time. But what I will do is, break off. I've got a little laptop here set up, which hopefully we can show you some things on the screen as we go through it as well. So hopefully it'll be a good experience for everyone. And again, if you've got any questions, if you want to commentate or anything like that, add your commentary, please throw that into the chat as we go. So let's do it. Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, a Manager's Guide to Communication, Collaboration and Coordination with Microsoft Teams by Paul Woods, Helen Blunden, Benjamin Elias and Daryl Webster. Before we get into it, a big shout out to Helen, Ben and Daryl for their work on the book as well. Definitely it was a team effort bringing this together. And in fact, we wrote the whole thing in Teams. So we'll talk about that in one of the chapters in the book as well. So what I'll do now, I'm just going to crack open to, maybe to start with the contents page there and kind of talk about how we structured the book just as a starting point before we get into the content. What we wanted to do is kind of make it a really approachable book for managers to try and get their head around what Teams is, think about how they can structure teamwork in the most effective way, and then give them lots of examples in terms of how they could think about structuring their team. So really the book's broken into 3 parts plus an introduction, if you think of it that way. So we'll cover off all the introductory stuff today. We'll read through that. Part 1, we get into, like what is Teams and what is the actual, what is a tool, how can you use a tool to do some discrete things, whether it's to do some simple communication, collaborate on a document or coordinate work and tasks and things within your team. Part 2 goes right into a framework we call the 10 Ps. And I know a lot of people that are on the live stream already are familiar with the 10 Ps. That's our kind of a framework that will help a manager kind of decide when is the right time to create a team. How many teams should I have? What's the right channel structure for my team? How should I encourage the teamwork to occur within that team? Right through to, what should we do when we're finished with this team? When it's all said and done, how do we capture that intellectual property out of that team and put it into places where it can be accessible in the future. So part 2 kind of covers off that 10P framework, and then part 3 is all about those use cases or examples of how you can use that 10P framework to do some things basically out of the box with Microsoft Teams. And one of the most fulfilling things that we've kind of had after we wrote the book is people coming back to us with examples of how they've applied the 10 Ps as well in terms of different use cases and structures they've used, set up within their organizations using Microsoft Teams. So if you've got any of those examples, feel free to throw them into the chat as well. We'd love to see some of those examples of how you've applied the frameworks within the book as well. So what I'll do, I'll start off with the foreword of the book. Now, the foreword was written by Caruana Gadamu from Microsoft Teams Engineering. So big thank you to Caruana for writing the foreword for us and offering to do it. If you don't follow Caruana on Twitter or LinkedIn or anything like that, I'd recommend you connect with her or follow her. She's driving a lot of really great content, a lot of at-scale programs across the world, helping organizations get as much value as possible out of the team. So if you're not following her, make sure you start it. Now let's get into it. In Microsoft Teams engineering, we have a simple goal: to make teamwork productive and enjoyable for all involved. The simplicity of this goal sometimes obscures its complexity. Achieving this, and the goal of empowering people and organizations around the world to achieve more of their own outcomes, drives us, both individually and as an organization. We believe that you too want productive and enjoyable teamwork, and that may contribute to why you've picked up this text. In my role running the customer advocacy group, I have the privilege of meeting people from around the world, all of whom strive to use technology to accelerate the delivery of their objectives. They have many questions. What tools should I use? How do I manage Microsoft Teams? What about all the other technology? These are all valid questions, answers for which you can find in this book and within our core documentation at successwithteams.com. Now, just pause there for a second. If you haven't gone to successwithteams.com, it's basically the one URL you need to remember to get access to all the resources that Microsoft's providing around Microsoft Teams, both from an adoption or getting value out of Teams point of view, but also from an administrative side as well. So if you're thinking about Microsoft Teams, you haven't actually bit the bullet yet and jumped into it, or you're trying to get more sustainable value out of Teams, now we're kind of pushing through the pandemic, Success with Teams is a great starting point to find that information. All right, back to the book. Yet when I meet with these passionate, intelligent people, I encourage them to remember a key element of success: their employees. Teamwork, after all, is about people, not technology. 100% agree. Microsoft Teams is nothing short of a transformative tool for productivity in your environment. We've been excited and humbled by the reactions of people from every type of organization. Acting as a hub for teamwork, it brings together people, information, and powerful tools from within and outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. It strives to support your work in natural ways and to increase your enjoyment of your work along the way. But it is only as powerful as the people who use it. And I think we can all agree that the value is generated by people in your organization. The technology just helps them do that. It kind of sets the scene or the context for that to occur. But it really comes down to the people in your organization. The success of any technology implementation rests in the hands of employees in all their variety. First-line information workers, executive and skilled alike, deserve a world-class employee experience on any device. Deciding to implement Microsoft Teams is a step towards delivering that experience, and the knowledge contained in this book can help you design it in a way that will inspire and delight. You can see a few of the Microsoft marketing messages coming through as well. So the cynic in me comes through, but I absolutely agree with what Caruana says there in the forward as well, is that I think for the longest time, organizations have left a lot of their employees to their own devices, no pun intended, and kind of maybe you think about their employees almost being like a victim of technology. So technology hasn't been upgraded. They haven't had the right technology at their fingertips. And I think the pandemic has absolutely shone a huge light on that as well, in terms of making sure people have tools to be able to connect, and the disparity of the different tool sets that are available to different people in different organizations or different locations or geographies around the world. That the inequality that's coming out in some of these organizations or countries is definitely a huge impact as well. So as you go through this text and the innovative framework it contains, I encourage you to prioritize the needs of these employees in their differing forms. If you don't know their needs, conduct a simple survey or visit your virtual or real-world coffee room or water cooler and ask a few questions. In my experience as an enterprise service adoption specialist, I've come to understand that people will tell you what they need if they are only asked. And that's our experience as well. Just stopping making assumptions about what people need and just going and talking to people. There's one example I can think of, actually multiple examples I can think of, but one in particular, where we worked with a customer and we went and just asked someone in the business a question, and they kind of had this gobsmacked look on their face. And they said, well, we replied back to them and said, why are you so surprised by this question? I said, this is the first time that anyone from IT has ever come and actually asked me how I want to work or how I want to do things. And I think the shift to cloud technologies, the shift to things like Office 365 and Teams takes a little bit of that administrative burden away from IT to enable them to have these proactive conversations. moving forward, which is awesome to see. But I think we need to do a lot more of it as a group, anyways. So where were we? You may think certain features are of the utmost importance, only to determine that the needs of your team are more straightforward. In any scenario, Microsoft Teams, when paired with a mindful strategy, can improve collaboration, connection, and outcomes. By its very nature, Microsoft Teams requires an iterative approach. The longer you use it, the more scenarios you'll be able to see that may be improved with its features. Integrating applications, creating tabs, communicating in channel conversations, and connecting Microsoft Teams to other line of business applications are additional capabilities that can pull together people and information in meaningful ways. The use of video in all your meetings, large and small, increases the quality of communication, which can lead to innovation and accelerated problem solving. Taking the given framework and applying it to your needs with an appropriate amount of flexibility will create the best experience. Keep suggested guardrails in place so that people across your organization have an idea of how to collaborate in this new experience while recognizing that their needs will change over time. And actually, that changing over time thing, I think that's a really important thing to kind of focus on here, that iterative approach and the changing needs over time. If we think just of our shared experience over the last 12 months with the pandemic hitting around the world, obviously a lot of our context changed pretty much immediately overnight, and our needs changed pretty immediately overnight as well. So this brute force approach to work from home or distributed work absolutely hit us all. And now we've kind of gone through that process and we've kind of seen that it's working, and particularly in Australia, but also in other locations around the world, we're starting to, have people coming back into offices where we might have a little bit of, the pandemic under control. In other parts of the world, it's getting worse, and the work from home is going to be a long-term thing for a while now. Our needs are changing based on these macro, pandemic health-related reasons, let alone all the changes to business processes and work practices in our organizations as well. So having this iterative mindset, this continuously evaluating, what are the simple things that we can solve today? What are the time-consuming or frustrating things that we can work on today, and continuously improving those things as all that change and that flux occurs around us in the environment, I think is a really great philosophy to have as well. So I absolutely agree with Caruana, what she said there. All right, utilizing these capabilities together, centered around shared goals, can reduce context switching across other experiences. This shared focus can aid in reducing change fatigue and the stresses too often encountered in the modern workplace. I believe that investing your time in what this book has to offer will speed you towards a streamlined experience that you and your employees deserve. At Microsoft, we're here to help. Use this book and our online forums to gain knowledge, ask questions, and get inspiration from other travelers on this path. You can find me and many others of our group in the Microsoft technical community, in our Microsoft Teams forum at aka.ms/teamscommunity, and our site dedicated to driving adoption of all the services in Microsoft 365, aka.ms/Microsoft adoption. So what I do, I'll pause there for a second, and we'll see if we can get this to work, because my laptop's just gone to sleep. I've got a little button here, which will switch across to that laptop. And I knew it. I think it's going to stream it out backwards. Looks like on my screen it's backwards. If it's around the right way, hopefully you can see it. We might fix this up for the next live stream. But those two resources that I just talked about, aka.ms/teamscommunity, is a great space to go to if you want to explore some of the more technical parts of Microsoft Teams and like how to set up the infrastructure, but also there's a great community here in terms of keeping on top of new features and new capabilities that are coming out within the product. Questions, chances are if you've got a question about Microsoft Teams, it's been answered here in the technical community. So have a look at that, but read it from left to right, not right to left, what I can see on my screen here at the moment. The other one there is the aka.ms/Microsoft adoption or adoption.microsoft.com. That's where you'd find that. These are all the adoption resources if you need to run an adoption campaign around Microsoft Teams in particular, but also all the other Microsoft 365 workloads, including a new one that got released just this week around Microsoft Lists. You'll find links to all of that stuff here within adoption.microsoft.com. So you can find that there as well. Cool. What we'll do is go back to me and finish off the forward. So reading this book is the beginning of a wonderful journey, increasing collaboration and productivity as an evolution in human behavior. When you prioritize the overall employee experience and the quality of your teamwork as a whole, we believe you will achieve your goals. And Caruana goes on here to kind of thank authors, which we don't need to read here. Thank you very much, Caruana, for writing the forward for us. We really, really appreciate it. So with that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pause here for a second and just have a look and see if there's any questions in here. So it's awesome to see some of the feedback we're getting in there from Denzil. So great to see 10 pieces of Bible for me. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that feedback as well. So question there from Denzil. Would love to see how you position the book for C-level, or how you think about this for the C-level. So it's a really interesting question, Denzil. I'd love to spend a minute talking about it. I think for us, the interesting thing about executives is that they're when it comes to it, at the end of the day, they're still just real people, and they're employees that are trying to navigate the world and trying to figure out how to do things themselves. And like many of us in our work, they too suffer from things like imposter syndrome. They suffer from not being quite sure about how they need to approach things, even though on their outside they might look like they're completely in control and got things on top of things. So when we're engaging with executives and talking to C-levels around how we apply these frameworks and how we think about it, really, there's a couple of things we focus on. First is trying to have a more intimate conversation with that C-level executive. So not doing it in a group or not doing it with their team necessarily at first, to make sure that they've got a safe space where they can talk about some of those challenges or frustrations that they face without impacting the persona they want to maintain with their peers or with their team as well. So kind of having an individual conversation with them absolutely is a great starting point. The second one is grounding it in stuff that they care about, grounding it in stuff that makes sense to them. So what those time-consuming or frustrating processes that they need to work through every day. So it could be their monthly reporting. It could be just getting situational awareness of what's going on with their team, because they're constantly sending emails out to people and people aren't responding to them in terms of getting them status updates. And there's some pretty common things that you'd come across with pretty much every C-level executive that you'd talk to. That they would be frustrated by or challenged by. And as soon as you can find that one thing, that's the opportunity to start positioning teams and rethinking how we do teamwork and applying frameworks like the 10 Ps to achieve that. So really, to answer your question, it's really about trying to solve that, identify what is that one thing that they really care about that will help them improve their work day to day, but doing it in a way that doesn't impact their persona in the workplace as well. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll crack on to the preface of the book, and we'll do that chapter and maybe the introduction to the introductory chapter, and then we'll kind of wrap it there for today as well. Right. It was the 14th of March 2017 when things started to change. For most of the decade, organizations around the world had begun to embrace Microsoft's Office 365 to help their information or knowledge workers improve the way they work. Some organizations started by migrating their email to the cloud, enabling their workforce to remove the shackles of a 200 megabyte email inbox that had gotten in the way of doing things for years. Others started to shift away from their traditional S drives or T drives or P drives, their network shares, to an environment where more than one person could work on the same document at the same time. I don't know if everyone's worked in an organization with a shared drive before. You get that little dialog box that comes up and says, this document is locked, read only. Do you want to notify when it gets unlocked? Like, that's been a frustration of anyone wanting to collaborate in any organization for the last 20 years. So these are all simple changes when you write them on paper, but absolutely game-changing in the way that they could influence how people and teams work together. However, most organizations saw Office 365 as just a bundle of different tools. You would regularly hear trainers talk about your toolkit. I think a lot of them still do today, which contain different tools for different purposes. For example, SharePoint. You can use SharePoint for your team files, Skype for Business to communicate with your team using chat, audio, or video, or Planner to keep track of your tasks. This toolkit approach meant that your work was almost always spread across multiple silos in Office 365. As the complexity of your work increased, so did the cost of switching or the mental gymnastics needed to keep up with where things were, or dare I say it, what tool to use when. And we actually see a lot of this still today, like people grounding their discussions around Office 365 in the products themselves, as opposed to where the conversation needs to be, which is in the business processes or the work practices. So it's not about picking a tool, it's about solving a business problem and how you can apply all these different technologies, all these capabilities of the technologies to solve that particular problem. That's a whole other sidebar conversation we can have in another live stream. The day of March 14, 2017 changed all that. On the same day that the world's oldest golf club, Muirfield in Scotland, voted to admit women as members for the first time, and 52 sets of David Bowie stamps were launched into space, Microsoft Teams was unleashed on the world. At Adopt and Embrace, we set up Microsoft Teams straight away, and were blown away within minutes. As a distributed team, and we've been distributed since we started the company 5 years ago, and we relied so heavily on video conferencing. So when we opened up Teams and saw the quality of that video conferencing coming through, we were absolutely convinced. I was really excited too. I took a photo and posted it on our company's Facebook and LinkedIn pages, and here's a photo of it there. Yeah, it's one of the only photos we've got in the book. I'm taking a photo of our very first Teams experience on my Surface Pro. I took the photo over Tim's shoulder. Interesting little sidebar conversation. So Tim used to work for us at Adopt and Embrace. And Tim's one of those really, really annoying millennials, like really, really young millennials. It makes me feel really, really old, even though I'm only 38. So we went on eBay and bought the old like Word 6.0 manuals that came with Word. Back in the old days when you bought Office on floppy disks, and they'd come with a printed manual and things like that. So we got one of those printed manuals, and then we discovered that the manual itself was older than Tim. When he got into the office. So anyways, it just shows you how far technology has come in the last 25 years, but also how much of it is still the same. Again, another interesting conversation to talk about later. After about 30 minutes of playing with Teams, we knew this could change the way that teams across the world could embrace technology and improve how they work every day. It took us a while to figure out exactly how, though. As a team, we continued to experiment and agreed on a simple approach that enabled us to better manage the way we collaborated and coordinated our customer work. The resulting improvement in the way we captured and shared knowledge and worked together to achieve better outcomes for our customers had a meaningful impact on our business, and it really did. It was at that time that our customers started to realize the potential positive impact on their businesses that could take place by rethinking business processes and work practices using Microsoft Teams. A true digital workspace where we can communicate about, collaborate on, and coordinate our work is now possible. A single pane of glass that allows us to better manage our workday is achievable, as is the ability to remove constraints of legacy IT infrastructure that stops us from being more mobile and closer to our customers. Chances are, if you're reading this book, that moment for you is today. And chances are, for most of you watching this live stream, that moment was probably 12 months ago. It's 9 to 12 months ago. As we all had to immediately work from home when we went through the pandemic. And I think this is a really great, that's a really great example of how we were able to use cloud infrastructure to get that old legacy IT infrastructure out of the way to enable us to shift to this remote work. I just think, if the pandemic hit 3 or 4 years earlier, how poorly positioned almost every organization in the world would be for that wholesale shift to remote work. So I think we got very, very lucky, even though it's horrible to think about luck in the context of a pandemic. But I think we got very lucky the fact that a lot of this infrastructure was in place when we needed to make that shift as well, and continue to support us as we move into this new world of work as well. So why did we write this book? Well, we saw early versions of Microsoft Teams under a non-disclosure agreement months before it was publicly released, and could see the potential of how, if used well, it could help transform how teams work together. It wasn't until we observed how our customers were first taking their first steps, dipping their toes into the Microsoft Teams water, that we noticed that more was necessary than just Microsoft Teams training. The early adopters jumped right in and started creating their own teams. People defaulted to the familiar. I work in a marketing team, therefore we need a marketing team. We are in Region X, therefore we need a Region X team. The result was twofold. First, a somewhat messy list of teams that loosely but didn't quite align to the organizational structure. Secondly, the realization that nothing had changed, and almost all the teams created simply duplicated the email distribution lists of the past. The problems with email overwhelm or the challenges of poor work or organizational design were simply replicated in another system, with some GIFs and some emojis. There was no net gain in effectiveness or efficiency. We knew that without some guidance, what we sometimes call bumper bowling or this is why you buy the audiobook, because I get my words right on that one. Guide rails to ensure that you hit at least some, if not all of the pins when you throw a bowling ball down a lane would occur. Most individuals, teams, and organizations looking to embrace new ways of working empowered by Microsoft Teams would likely not achieve the full outcome that they were seeking and would be unable to use Microsoft Teams to its full potential. And again, we've seen that with organizations that have kind of been new to Microsoft Teams during the pandemic and kind of quickly gone into Microsoft Teams is there's been Microsoft Teams training. So talking about the features of the product. So this is how you send a chat. This is how you do a screen share in a meeting. This is how you schedule a meeting, those kinds of things. Focus on the functional how to do stuff, but not much focus on the why or how we need to work together as a group. And when you see people struggling in your organizations to use Microsoft Teams, it's because they're missing that context. They might know how to press the buttons, but they don't know what sequence they should be doing things in and why they should be doing things to ultimately connect them back to the work they need to do every day. So it's through this iterative work with our customers over the past 18 months, helping them to navigate what seems like the age-old Microsoft Teams question, how do I best set up my team, that we developed our Adopt and Embrace 10 Ps of Microsoft Teams design framework. It started out just as 3 Ps, problem, purpose, and people. Those 3 Ps could help anyone determine the right number of teams to create for any organizational challenge they face. We didn't want our customers trying to create one team to solve every problem. We, together with our customers, saw the value in a more granular focus on the deliverable work. As we delve deeper into substantial use cases, like how best to structure a team as a template for teaching and learning across an entire university, or how to structure a team for more informal committee meetings, or how to connect first-line workers into their support offices, that we realized more nuance was required. The remaining 7 Ps were slowly added to the framework. First, it was priorities to help determine the right mix of channels to include. Then principles to help make sense of how we all agree to use the team. And just the principles thing so important, like the forming, storming, and norming of your group as they come together, and getting that kind of shared understanding or commitment from each other in terms of how you're going to use the spaces, how quickly you're going to respond to comments, what's that service level obligation you're kind of giving each other in terms of how you engage in the space is so important. And so many people miss it when they make the shift to Teams, and it's that misalignment of expectations which shoots everyone in the foot in terms of getting their value out of Teams long term. So principles, talk about that. Plugins came next to guide how we add context and access to information or systems. This was followed by permissions to know who can do what and when, and performance, so we know what success looks like. Provisioning came next to determine the best way to get this collaboration and coordination space into the hands of the people who can generate value with it. And finally, perishability. What on earth do we need to do once we no longer need to use this team? Now, we'll be honest, and this is me absolutely being honest, perishability started out as a bit of a joke. We had 9 Ps, and I was trying to build a PowerPoint slide, and I said, look, we need to have an even number for this to make it sound a bit better if we're thinking about marketing and things like that. So, here's another random word that starts with P, because 10 P sounds better than 9 Ps. However, it has turned into one of the most important talking points we discuss with our customers, and equally so pre-pandemic, post-pandemic as well, to be honest, or during pandemic. Especially with those customers who want to make sure they maximize the use and reuse of their intellectual property, and those who want to ensure that their people are always learning, and IT departments who want to make sure that their Microsoft Teams environment does not suffer from unnecessary sprawl. And again, with some of the consequences of that brute force approach to remote work we've all gone through, and the introduction of Microsoft Teams, is some organizations have seen that sprawl definitely hit them quite substantially. There's 14 teams names: Paul's test team 3, Paul's test team 4, Sally's meeting, David's demo. So we see a lot of these teams started to create in spaces because organizations haven't thought about how they want to govern these environments really well. But then also, we see a lot of emphasis on security and compliance now as well, in terms of making sure that information that we're capturing in these new platforms and these new technologies actually meets our obligations when it comes to regulatory reporting or accessibility or discoverability of this information that we need to get it, particularly in government organizations as well. So all these things that people weren't necessarily thinking about, but they've come to light as real world examples of challenges or issues that need to be faced as well. The directions we saw from our customers when discussing the 10 Ps framework were the inspiration to write this book. We could see that managers were struggling to make sense of how best to use Microsoft Teams to positively impact their people. They had a lot of questions, but didn't have anywhere to start. IT teams also couldn't neatly translate their understanding of how the product worked into something that made sense for their internal customers, be it HR, marketing, sales, operations, field teams, or customer service. Enter the 10 Ps framework and this book. At Adopt and Embrace, one of our core values is always paying it forward. We couldn't just keep the 10 Ps framework for the relative handful of customers we work with in Australia and New Zealand. We wanted this idea to be spread across the world, which is why this book was born, and to be honest with you, why we're doing this live stream as well. At Adopt and Embrace, as a Microsoft 2018 Global Partner of the Year, we recognize that as a business, we should aspire to have a positive impact on a global scale. The best way we can do that, ironically, is not through the latest and greatest technology like Microsoft Teams, but through one of the most ancient and accessible technologies we have available, a book. We hope the ideas we develop in this book empower you to apply Microsoft Teams in new and innovative ways to help you better serve your customers, help you create a better employee experience, and help you make a positive impact. So that's the preface there with the book. What I'm going to do is pause there for a second. What we might do, I'm just thinking about, I can't remember how long the introduction is. Oh, it's not too bad. We might go through the introduction in a second, but I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat here to see. So Denzel's come in, used a lot of analogies to describe a team as a house and rooms as channels. I really love that that analogy, Denzel. I've seen that from a few people as well. So the team is basically a house that people can get access to through the front door. You can secure it at the front door there. People can get in and out. And then the channels within your team are basically the different rooms around that different house. And those rooms have different purposes for different things you want to do, be it the kitchen, living room, the bedroom, etc. So really, really great analogy, and it can be used quite successfully with people trying to get the message across as well. Awesome. So what we'll do, I think we've got enough time here. I might just go through the introduction. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe, yeah. We'll power through it, which should take us about 10 minutes to get through that content, hopefully, and then we can wrap up the stream for today. All right, introduction. Great. Another collaboration tool. Don't we have 16 other collaboration tools already? Email, desk phone, mobile phone, shared drives, the document spaces on our intranet, audio bridges, video conferencing, virtual meetings, even the water cooler in the kitchen. The list goes on. Why do we need a 17th? It's a really good question. The short answer is no. You probably don't need a 17th collaboration tool. The longer answer is that more technology tools will not improve the way your team works. Instead, how your team uses the tools at your fingertips to do their work is far more important. The even longer answer is that if you have your tool at your fingertips that helps remove the barriers between all those different collaboration tools, work can be even better. Chances are, if you've picked up this book or watching this recording or live stream, you have that tool at your fingertips, Microsoft Teams. Maybe your IT team has just launched Microsoft Teams to your team and the rest of your organization. Maybe one of your new starters is demanding Microsoft Teams be set up because they used it at their previous employer. Maybe you overheard someone in this line does not hasn't not aged very well. Sorry. Maybe you overheard someone in an airline lounge or on a plane talking about how Microsoft Teams has helped them get their Outlook inbox under control and their team to achieve more. I haven't been on a plane for work since March last year, and it's been so amazing. It's been so good. But we're not overhearing those conversations on planes anymore. Whichever way Microsoft Teams landed in your work life, the fact that you are curious enough to open up this book means that you want to learn more, and more importantly, figure out how you can use Microsoft Teams to make your team's life much easier. This can help you achieve your professional goals, like hitting your KPIs, and your personal goals, like getting your lunch break back and getting out of the office on time. Just a quick aside there around that. If there's one thing you take away from this book that isn't the 10P framework, is this idea of making sure you help people achieve both their professional goals, so what they're measured on or what they're KPI'd on to basically get their bonus or get their performance review, what's in their job description, but also blending that with their personal goals, which could be in a pre-COVID world, getting their lunch break back, in a currently COVID world or post-COVID world where we're in hybrid remote work, is trying to establish borders around work and life, so work doesn't just bleed into everything that we do. So if you can blend those professional and personal goals in your conversations, you're onto a winner in terms of helping to convince people about new ways of working and how they could apply things in different ways. Right now, you likely have several questions. What is Microsoft Teams? Why are we using Microsoft Teams? Or why should we? How is Microsoft Teams different from all the other options we have now? Who should be using Microsoft Teams? When is the right time to move away from email or a phone call and work in Microsoft Teams? How should our team set up our team or teams in Microsoft Teams to improve teamwork and connect with other teams in their teams across our organization's team of teams and their teams in Microsoft Teams? We mentioned Teams a lot in the book. One of the most frustrating things when we sent it off to the editor to get the book edited is that when we wrote the draft, we had a naming convention in terms of how we'd talk about Teams. So we'd talk about the product, and that would always be Microsoft Teams with capitalized M, capitalized T. If we talked about your team in the real world, it would be a lowercase t for team. If it was a team we'd set up within the product, it would be an uppercase T. So we had this naming convention that all of us agreed to, and we actually got through it quite well. And then when it went to the editor decided to, and to be fair, this is what they'd normally do, try and get some consistency in how they did that. So they basically went find and replace every time there was a team and put a capital T there, which completely ruined that naming convention. So just before we published the book, I spent about 7 hours going through the book, finding every single mention of team. And there's well and truly in the hundreds of team mentions in here, trying to get that capitalization right again. So, and it's a great naming convention if you need to use it inside your organization, but don't let an editor loose on it at all. As you may soon experience, talking about Microsoft Teams and the different permutations of teams and teamwork can sometimes be overwhelming and confusing. We can blame Microsoft Teams naming team for that. In most organizations, there are a handful of people that can navigate that overwhelm and understand the true potential of the new ways of working that Microsoft Teams creates. Generally, most people just want to get their job done and don't have the time to figure out yet another thing that the IT team has thrown at us. Many of your direct reports may be thinking, just tell me what I have to do and I will do it. We have seen it on the faces of our customers we have worked with since Microsoft Teams originally launched in March 2017. No matter what industry we work with, no matter the seniority of staff, a few people just get it. They jump right in, set up 1 or 4 or 29 different teams. They add different channels to help structure or filter the different topics the team is focused on. Then they invite everyone in to participate. The problem is, though, that those who get it assume a lot of knowledge that the rest of the team don't have yet. The rest of the team understands that this could be a better way of working, but they're not quite sure where to start. The purpose of this book is to help you, the influential executive, the rising star manager, the early career team leader, or the one person in your team that really wants to improve the way we have always done things, to bring new ways of working to life with Microsoft Teams. It doesn't matter that you haven't used Microsoft Teams yet, which, to be fair, I'd say most people watching this live stream have, or watching the recording have had some exposure to it. Or if you've given it a shot and created a few teams yourself. This book isn't really about Microsoft Teams and force-feeding you how to use its functionality. When we wrote this book, the Microsoft Teams for Dummies book wasn't available. If you want a really great primer or overview of how to use the functionality, that's what the Microsoft Teams for Dummies book is. I'd recommend you go have a crack at that. It's got all the screenshots and it's got all the the how-to step-by-step instructions of pressing the buttons. We wanted to write this book to be a little bit different from that, to talk about how we can structure work more effectively as well, make it a little bit more timeless too. The last thing we wanted to do when we wrote the book is be updating screenshots every 4 weeks as new features, new capability came into the product. So a deliberate decision on our part, and hopefully the folk over at the For Dummies books are enjoying updating those screenshots every little while as well. Instead of this book focused on helping you and your team improve the business process or a work practice that you engage in every day, empowered by Microsoft Teams, by giving you a framework to think about how you design the style of communication, collaboration, and coordination space for your team, however you define team. The business process or work practice you seek to improve could be how you run your weekly team meeting. It could be how you conduct stakeholder engagement across or outside of your organization. It could be how bringing together project teams or virtual teams to make things happen. Could be how you build your annual report or how you manage your recruitment process. The possibilities for business improvement powered by Microsoft Teams are immense. Navigating your way to unlocking that value can be frustrating. This book aims to make it as easy as possible for you, and in the process to help you look like the people-first, digitally enabled, customer-orientated, and cost-conscious manager that you know you are and your peers want to be. So we've got a few more pages here we'll get through. So how to make the most of this book. We've structured this book into 3 parts. I actually covered quite a lot of this in the intro spiel, so we'll go through this very quickly. For those of you that are new to Microsoft Teams, who want to build an understanding of what Microsoft Teams is, and more importantly, understand how you can use it as an executive manager or team leader, start with part 1. Part 1, we go through all the basics of how to use technology, and that's what our next live stream will probably be focused on. In part 2, we tighten our focus onto two of those management skills, collaboration and coordination. We introduce a framework that you can use, the 10 Ps of Microsoft Teams design, to help you create the perfect Microsoft Teams powered workspace or workspaces. The business-led approach to the 10 Ps framework will ensure that you don't just recreate the problems you have today, trying to manage your overflowing inbox and chasing status updates from your direct reports. Instead, the 10 Ps will ensure you and your team can focus on the right work at the right time, understand how best to work with each other, and ultimately empower your team to achieve more. Armed with the 10 Ps framework, you will be well on your way to Microsoft Teams success. And then in part 3, we illustrate what that success can look like using the 10P framework with lots of great exemplar stories, which we'll share at the end. If you're new to Microsoft Teams or have limited experience with tools like Skype for Business, Link, SharePoint, or Planner, we recommend you start with part 1, which we'll cover in the next live stream. This will give you the foundation you need to understand how you could use Microsoft Teams today. If you're familiar with Microsoft Teams and are a member or owner of a few teams already, part 2 and part 3 are where you should focus your attention. Some of our beta readers found that starting with examples and use cases in part 3 helped them understand what is really possible, whereas others enjoyed starting with the simplicity of the 10 Ps framework to help them come to grips with how they could better structure the teams they already engage with. Either way, we encourage you to choose your own adventure through the book to ensure you can unlock as much value as possible. One quick thing there around beta readers. So thank you to all the beta readers that validated the text for us ultimately and made sure we were going in the right direction. If you are interested in becoming a beta reader for our next book, make sure you reach out, maybe put in the comments below. We have a new book we're working on in the background, which we will release hopefully sometime in the next few months. But we're getting close to the point where we need beta readers. So if you're interested in seeing some of the new content that we've got coming up, make sure you reach out to us and let us know. All right, last bit of the chapter. Making the leap to Microsoft Teams. You might be asking yourself, is it worth going through the pain of changing how we do things now and making the leap to improved ways of working with Microsoft Teams? Look, we think so. It doesn't matter if your team is out in the field cutting sugarcane, in a laboratory doing research, planning a product launch, teaching a course with 1,500 students at a university, entering new markets, or managing the financials of a multinational organization. There will be a variety of simple and increasingly complex ways by which your work today could be improved using Microsoft Teams. We wrote that almost 18 months ago now, but that's absolutely come to life. There's so many incredibly interesting, novel ways that people are applying Microsoft Teams now to do some really amazing things. And I'd love to share some of those as we go through these live streams over the next couple of weeks. Microsoft Teams can't and won't solve everything, despite what the marketing folk and some IT teams will tell you. But it can help you as a manager to reduce the overwhelm of your team, increase your situational awareness, and create the opportunity for work to be front and center rather than diluted across multiple silos. This will help you empower your people to do more. We might be biased, but to highlight the power of Microsoft Teams, we wrote this entire book using Microsoft Teams. From the initial sketches and note-taking as we planned the structure of the book in the Teams shared OneNote notebook, to multiple authors engaging in many conversations while working on one manuscript, co-authored in the working manuscript channel. It really was. It was one Word document the entire time, which over 4 months of writing it with 4 co-authors was just incredible to see it in action. We invited our 2 internal book writing coaches into our workspace to share our work and to help make the book a reality. Our beta readers shared their feedback with us by emailing the beta reader channel, so all the feedback was captured in one spot. The surveys the beta readers filled out using Microsoft Forms were added as tabs to the channel so the authors could see all the feedback in real time. Then, finally, planning and execution of the book launch with our marketing agency was conducted in Microsoft Teams. Communication, collaboration, and coordination in action. Now is the time for you to write the next chapter in your story. It's time to explore how you can amplify your impact as an executive, manager, or team leader using Microsoft Teams. So that's the end of the introduction. I think we've gone, We've gone about 50 minutes in terms of live streams. I think that's a good kind of point to stop now before we get into the main content of part 1. So what we'll do next time when we meet, we'll probably set it up for around about the same time next week, and maybe try and get that consistent over the next little while. We'll dive into part 1 where we talk about some of the capabilities within Microsoft Teams. We'll do the demo. I just noticed a thing there. It looked like that was actually coming through all right. It did look backwards on my screen here, but coming through perfectly on your screen. So we'll do a lot more demo in the next one, kind of showing you some of this stuff as well. And we'll kind of start going through the content as well. and it's in the book. So thanks so much for coming along. Again, if you want to see the next live stream, make sure you subscribe to the channel, Adopt and Embrace YouTube channel. If you like the content, if you got value out of the content today, make sure you like the video. Make sure that if you have peers or others in your organization that you think would get value out of the content that was shared today or in the future live streams, make sure you share the channel with them as well. And then I'll go in and have a look at some of those comments and some of the chats there and reply to you throughout the rest of the day. So thank you so much for joining. Really looking forward to seeing you next time we go live, and best of luck for the rest of your week. Have a great day. Catch you later.